Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Yoma Daf Mem discusses a lengthy machlokes between Rabbi Yanai and Rabbi Yochanan about the drawing of lots to determine which of the goats will go to be the Karban Chatas and which of the goats in the Avod of Yom Kippur will go to the Azazel. Gemara is going to introduce the machlokes. The Gemara will say it is in one of two, within the opinion of one of two Tanaim, and there's two versions of which Tana it's in. And the Gemara is going to try to figure out what we can determine about this machlokes, which Tana is the machlokes within, and can we figure out the opinions here. And the Gemara will go through a number of proofs on the subject. It's a complex machlokes. Let's try to get the details straight. So as we have learned so far, the Kohen Gadol drew lots. So the Gemara divides the lot drawing into two steps. There's the lifting of the lots, pulling it out of the box, and then there's placing the lots on the actual animals. One lot on each of the goats to designate this one is for the Karban Chatas and this one is for the Azazel. So the Gemara is discussing, do you have to do this, or is it just a mitzvah to do this? And if it's a mitzvah, so then if I didn't do it, if the Kohen Gadol didn't do it, he skipped it, then his avoda is kosher anyway. If you have to do it, then it's ma'akev. And if you don't do it, the avoda is puzzle. So the Gemara says as follows. Both Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yanai, all Amoraim agree that the second stage, placing it on the animal, is not ma'akev. You don't have to do that. That's just a mitzvah. The question is, do you have to actually pull a lot out of the box or not? Do you have to do the drawing of lots or not? And on that, Rabbi Yanai says it is ma'akev, and Rabbi Yochanan says that it's not ma'akev. The question is, which of two Tanaim is this machlokes going within? What's the two Tanaim? It's a machlokes between the Tanaim Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemia. Rabbi Yehuda holds all the big day, all the avoda that was performed wearing the big day lavan, the clothing that was supposed to be worn when the Kohen Gadol went inside the Kodesh HaKodashim. Any avoda that he did in those clothing outside the Kodesh HaKodashim is not ma'akev. That should include the drawing of the lots. That was also something that he did outside the Kodesh HaKodashim while he was wearing the big day lavan. Rabbi Nechemia says no, those avodas all are ma'akev. So the question is, where is this machlokes? In which opinion is it? Is Rabbi Yochanan saying that here Rabbi Nechemia would agree that this avoda, that this part of drawing the lots is not ma'akev, even though it's big day lavan and it's outside the Kodesh HaKodashim, which every other thing is ma'akev, but this is not ma'akev? And the machlokes between Rabbi Yanai and Rabbi Yochanan is in the opinion of Rabbi Nechemia, and they both agree that Rabbi Yehuda would for sure say that it's not ma'akev. That's the Gemara's first version. That's what the Gemara offers first. Again, to repeat that, Rabbi Yehuda says that any avodah which you do wearing the big day lavan outside the Kodesh HaKodashim is not ma'akev, and that applies to this as well. There's no tzad that it does not apply to this. Machlokes Rav Yanai and Rav Yochanan is in Rav Nechemia's opinion that most avodas wearing the big day lavan outside the Kodesh HaKodashim are ma'akev. The question is, what about this? Rav Yanai says, yeah, Rav Nechemia says ma'akev, sure, why not? Rav Yochanan would say, no, it's not ma'akev, this doesn't count as an avoda. Drawing lots is not avoda, so therefore Rav Nechemia would agree that it's not ma'akev. That's Gemara's first version. Gemara's second version is no. In Rabbi Nechemia, there's no machlokes. When Nechemia says it's ma'akev, this is for sure ma'akev. For sure, you have to do it. No way out. In Rabbi Yehuda, though, who says that most things the Kohen Gadol will do wearing the big day lavan, the white clothing outside the Kodesh HaKodashim, are not ma'akev, you could go without them, this maybe is ma'akev. And that's what Rabbi Yanai says. Rabbi Yanai says this is ma'akev. Rabbi Yochanan says no, he will say that this is not ma'akev. But Rabbi Yanai says this, he will say is ma'akev, and the reason is because the pasuk specifically says Asher Allah twice, which is an extra phrase that says this is different than everything else he's going to do wearing the white clothing outside the Kodesh HaKodashim, and this is ma'akev. According to this version, Rabbi Nechemia, everybody agrees, holds that it is ma'akev. Okay, so the Gemara says, now let's try to prove which version is correct. So the Gemara says, I'm going to bring you a brisa, and according to one of the versions, the brisa is a kasha on Rabbi Yanai, and let me show you why. The brisa quotes a Tana, doesn't say the Tana's name, and it says that it's not ma'akev. It says that doing the geirol, doing the drawing of the lots, is not ma'akev. It's just a mitzvah, it's not ma'akev. Now, who could this Tana be? So, if you hold that there's no machlokes in Rabbi Yehuda, the machlokes is only Rabbi Nechemia, which was our first version, so then Rabbi Yehuda could be the author of this, and there's no problem. Everybody can say that this is Rabbi Yehuda, because everybody agrees that Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's not ma'akev. If, however, you say that the machlokes is in Rabbi Yehuda, that means that everybody agrees that Rabbi Nechemia holds that it is ma'akev. It's definitely not Rabbi Nechemia. And if the machlokes is in Rabbi Yehuda, that means according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that it's not ma'akev even in Rabbi Yehuda, so then this Tana will be Rabbi Yehuda. Fine, because he says it's not ma'akev. But according to Rabbi Nechemia, you're not left with anybody who says it's not ma'akev. According to Rabbi Yanai, let's be clear. According to Rabbi Yanai, you're not left with anybody who says it's not ma'akev. Rabbi Nechemia says it's ma'akev, and Rabbi Yehuda says it's ma'akev. So who is this Tana going to be? So the Gemara therefore says, I'll tell you something else. This brisa is not talking about drawing the lots. This brisa is talking about placing the lot on the animal. And on that, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yanai both agree it's not ma'akev. That was one thing that they agreed on. So this brisa has nothing to do with us. This brisa is not involved in our machlokes at all. Which says, okay, I'm going to bring you another brisa, very similar, but this time your answer is not going to work. This brisa quotes a machlokes between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon as to which stages of this activity, which is ma'akev and which is not. And here it's divided into three stages. There's the saying of vidui, the drawing of lots, and the putting the lots on the actual animal itself. Now, the saying of the vidui, the Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon argue. The Rabbanan say it's not ma'akev. Rabbi Shimon says it is ma'akev. That's clear. The Gemara will discuss that machlokes later. The vidui is the most likely thing to be ma'akev. It's more ma'akev than anything else, and on that they argue. The other thing that they discuss is what's called hagrola, doing the lot, and we don't know if that means pulling out the lot or putting it on the animal. It's the same word which we used in the previous brisa, which we thought at first meant pulling out the lot, and then we said no, it means putting it on the animal. Now, pulling out the lot is far more likely to be ma'akev. That's the first step. So, what happens in the brisa is as follows: the Rabbanan say that doing hagrola is not ma'akev, and Rabbi Shimon agrees doing hagrola is not ma'akev. So, what are we talking about here? If you want to tell me that we're talking about pulling out the lots, and Rabbi Shimon says it's not ma'akev, and the Rabbanan says it's not ma'akev, so that's very good. Pulling out the lots is not ma'akev. Certainly, the hanacha is not ma'akev. That makes a lot of sense. If, however, we're talking about the hanacha, putting it on the animal, and the Rabbanan say that's not ma'akev, and Rabbi Shimon says, I agree with you that that's not ma'akev, Rabbi Shimon is implying that the previous step of drawing the lot is ma'akev. And that can't be, because we have a different brisa where Rabbi Shimon says clearly that the actual drawing of the lots is not ma'akev. Rabbi Shimon says that if you lost one of the sheep, if you lost one of the goats, you need to bring another goat. So you don't have to bring another two and draw lots again. Just bring another goat, and he becomes the goat that got lost. He'll take his place. You don't have to draw lots again. Even though there's no lots drawn for this goat, that's fine, because drawing of lots is not ma'akev. Even the regular drawing of lots is not ma'akev. So it comes out as follows. This conversation between the Rabbanon and Rabbi Shimon, where they're both agreeing that the drawing of lots is not ma'akev, has to be talking about the drawing. It can't be talking about the putting it on the animal, because if it's talking about putting it on the animal, the implication is that Reb Shimon holds something which is not true. So it has to be talking about the drawing. If it has to be talking about the drawing, then we see here clearly that there's a Rabbanan who hold that the drawing of lots is not ma'akev. And again, I go back to the previous step I had before. According to Rabbi Yanai, who is that? According to Rabbi Yanai, according to our second version, that can't be anybody. It's not Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yanai holds that Rabbi Yehuda, according to the second version of this machlokes, Rabbi Yanai holds that Rabbi Yehuda holds that it is ma'akev, because it's a special pasuk, and Rabbi Nechemia always holds it's ma'akev. So here before we've proven that our first version has to be correct. So the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. I'm going to reinterpret what Rabbi Shimon said. You wanted to prove to me that Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan were having their whole conversation in the case of drawing the lots. The conversation was going on in both, and Rabbi Shimon was not clear what the Rabbanan were saying. The Rabbanan said hagrola, and I'm going to tell you that the Rabbanan were really talking about putting it on the animal, just the same answer I told you before. They were not talking about drawing the lots, and that the Rabbanan really could agree to Rabbi Yanai, according to whichever Tani you want, that it is ma'akev. Drawing the lots is ma'akev. And when Reb Shimon, what the Rabbanan were talking about was hanacha. when they said in this Mishnah, they said that Hagrala is not Ma'akev, they were talking about Hanacha, putting it actually on the animal, that is not Ma'akev. And Rabbi Shimon said, I agree to that. Now, but why would Rabbi Shimon say I agree to that if he also holds that even the Aliyah is Ma'akev? He also holds that even drawing the lots in the first place is not Ma'akev. Why would he say, I agree to you that putting on the animal is not Ma'akev? You even agree that the step before that is not Ma'akev. We've proven that. So the Gemara says, because he wasn't sure what the Rabbanim were saying. He was saying, I don't know what you're talking about. If you're talking about the Aliyah, so then I agree with you that it's not Ma'akev. If, however, you were talking about the Hanacha, and you hold that Aliyah is Ma'akev, then I disagree with you about that. And I say that Aliyah is not Ma'akev. So that's what he just said. I don't know what you're referring to. If you're talking about Hanacha, then I hold that it's not Ma'akev. And therefore, this opinion of this Rabbanan, who we don't know who it is, they were talking about it. We can say they were talking about Hanacha. Rabbi Shimon wasn't sure, but we could say they were talking about Hanacha. And therefore, about Aliyah, they hold that it is Ma'akev. And that's how either version of Rabbi Yanai would fit, and he could say that it's either Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Nechami, whichever one you want. Now, the Gemara later moves on to discuss the machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim about Vidoy, whether the Vidoy is Ma'akev or not. This Gemara appears later in the Daf, but Rashi says it's in the wrong place. It should be actually quoted here. The correct gear is to move it to here. So let's see that Gemara. The Gemara says, what's machlokes as to whether or not Vidoy is Ma'akev? The Gemara says it's based on a different machlokes as to how long does the goat, the soyer that's going to Azazel, how long does it have to stay alive? What happens if it dies suddenly in the middle? So the pasuk that's describing the goat says that while everything else is going on, it should be Ya'amad Chai Lefnei Hashem. It has to stay alive before Hashem. So Gemara says, why? Well, the pasuk says L'chaper olav. It has to be used as a kapara. It has to stay alive until it does kapara. Once it does kapara, if it dies afterwards, you don't have to bring another one. So Gemara says, what's the kapara? So that's a machlokes. The machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, if the kapara is when the blood of the other goat is properly applied, as it has one application on the kaporis and one on the paroches. Or is the kapara when the Kohen Gadol comes and says Vidoy on this goat? What's that machlok is based on? So the pasuk that describes it says V'chila mikapras hakodesh v'sayel moed v'samizbech v'hikra v'sasayar achai. After he finishes all the other kapara, he comes to do kapara on this one. So just like all the other kaparas were referring to blood kaparas, this kapara here also, we're saying that this has to be alive until kapara. That's also a blood kapara. According to that is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, so it's a blood kapara. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's not talking about the blood kapara, it's referring to what it's about to say. Come and say Vidoy on it. So it has to stay alive until the Vidoy. So therefore you see the machlokas is, again, does the goat which is going to Azazel have to stay alive until Vidoy, or does not have to stay alive until Vidoy? Gemara says that's the basis of this machlokas, whether or not the Vidoy is Ma'akev. The Vidoy is the kapara of this goat, or it's not the kapara of this goat. That's what that machlokas is about. Okay, now we'll go back to other proofs that the Gemara brings in the machlokas as to whether or not the drawing of lots is ma'akev. If you don't do the drawing of lots, did it make a psul in the avoda? And the Gemara now brings a proof which is part of a lengthy discussion about what happens if the Kohen Gadol confused the order of the avoda of the par, the cow of the Kohen Gadol, and the goat, the one who's will be used as a carbon chatas that's slaughtered and his blood is applied. So what is the correct order that's supposed to happen? So it's to be as follows. First, the Kohen Gadol says Vidoy on the par. And then he goes and he does drawing the lots on the soyer. He draws the lots on the goat. Then he goes back to the par, goes back to the cow, and he says Vidoy a second time. Then he slaughters it, and he puts the coals and the ketores in the spoon and the shovel. He brings it into the Kodesh Kodashim, does the ketores, and he applies the blood of the cow, the blood of this par, on the kaparas inside the Kodesh HaKodashim. Then he goes back out and he takes the sire, the goat, slaughters it, and he puts its blood on the kaparas. So the blood is important to focus on. The blood of the cow, first one on the kaparas, followed by the blood of the goat on the kaparas. Then he does the same order on the paroches. Here he goes outside the Kodesh Kodashim, and he does first par, then sire on the paroches. Then he mixes the two together and applies it on the inner mizbeach. So in all the avodas, pretty much the par goes first. You have the par slaughtered first, then the Sawyer later. You have the Par's blood applied first in the Kaporis, then the Sawyer's blood applied in the Kaporis, and you have the Par's blood applied in the Parochas, and then the Sawyer's blood applied in the Parochas. Now what happens if you mix up in order? So the Brisa says that if you do the goat before the Par, you passel the goat. The Par has to be done first. You can't do the goat first. However, if you accidentally did the Par before the goat, something which was supposed to be done in the Par before the goat, that is not a problem. That did not make a psul in the Par. Doesn't matter if something later, in a later set, meaning in each set the Par goes first. But if you took a Sar from a later set, a Sar activity from a later set, and made it earlier than a Par activity, so then you messed up the Sar activity. That's a psul. The Par has to go first. But if you took a Par activity from a later set and made it earlier than a Sawyer activity in an earlier set, that's not a problem. So the Gemara says, what's the case? What type of activity are you referring to? That if you took a Par activity from a later set and did it before a Sar activity from an earlier set, that is not a psul. What is it referring to? If it's referring to the order of the applications of the blood, that you took that you did the Par on the Parochas, which is the second application, and you did that before the Sawyer on the Kapiris, which is the first application. So don't tell me that doesn't mess up the order. That does mess up the order. Even Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that the order is not so important, Rabbi Yehuda agrees that a avoda of a big day lavan, an avoda wearing the white clothing, which is done inside the Kodesh HaKodashim, that has to be done correctly. You do that wrong, that messes it up. He's lenient on an avoda in the big day lavan outside the Kodesh HaKodashim, but here you're talking about the kaparis, that's inside. That has to be done in the right order. So that would for sure be a psul. It cannot be that's not a problem if you do the Sar then before the Par. So what then are we referring to? We have to refer to the first step. We have to be referring to the Vidoy and the Gairol. If you did the Shechita of the Par before the Gairol of the Sire, you slaughtered the Par and did the second video on the Par before you did the drawing of lots for the goats, that's not a problem. So you see that the drawing of lots is not a problem. If you skip the drawing of lots, it's alright. Things are allowed to continue. Clear proof that the drawing of lots is not ma'akev. Yeah, it has to be at least somebody holds that way. According to one version of the Machagas that we said earlier, Rabbi Yanai holds it. Nobody holds that way. So you see that approach must be wrong. Okay, so we have a few approaches to resolve this. The Gemara first wants to say that maybe really it's Rabbi Yehuda, and when we say that you mixed up the order and you did some avoda of the Par before the Sar, it's referring to the application of the mixed bloods on the inner Mizbeach, the golden Mizbeach. You're supposed to do that after the application of the Sar's blood to the Pareches. If you did that first, that's not a problem. The Gemara says, then who would hold that way? Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that the order of the avodas outside doesn't count. The Gemara says, no, it can't be. This counts as an avoda inside. Application of the blood on the Pareches counts as an application inside, and he would not hold that way. So Gemara says, okay, so maybe it's Reb Shimon. And Reb Shimon, we saw earlier, holds that the drawing of lots is never ma'akev. So we could say that he's the author of this. It's not Rabbi Yehuda, it's not Reb Nechemia, it's not either of those. It's Reb Shimon, and therefore it has nothing to do with our whole machlokes. Or I could tell you that it's really Rabbi Yehuda. And what we're saying here is that the order doesn't matter, but that doesn't mean that you could do without it. If you do it out of order, it's okay. But if you don't do it at all, that is ma'akev. That could be another answer. Okay, we now move on to the Gemara's next proof. The Gemara says, the Talmidim asked Rabbi Akiva, we know that it's far more of a good omen if the lot that says Haned Lashem comes up in the Kohen Gadol's right hand. So they asked him, well, what if it came up in their left hand? Can you switch it? You put it back and switch it. So Rabbi Akiva said, if you do that, the tzaddikim are going to think that the tzeddukim, the Rishonim, are going to think that you just do whatever you want. If it didn't come out the way you wanted, you switch it. And it will more give them ammunition to attack us and to say these rabbis just do whatever they want. There is no actual halachic process. So don't do that. So Gemara says, so you see clearly that in halachically it's mutter. The only problem is what are the tzeddukim going to say? How could it halachically be mutter? If it came up, if you did the gairo, if you did the drawing of lots, and the soyer la azazel came up in the right hand, how could you undo that? How could you switch it? That's the soyer. That's the goat that's going La Azazel, you can't undo it. Must be that the Gairol doesn't really count for anything. The drawing of lots is not ma'akev. It's not really important. It's what he says that's important, and we don't care about the Gairol actually. So therefore, if he didn't do it altogether, for sure it's good. So Gemara says, no, some of the meats. When we say switch it, we don't mean we're going to take this goat that was designated by the Gairol to be Azazel and switch it to be Lashem. No, we don't. I mean, we're moving to switch sides. You're going to take the goat which is azazel from the right side and move it to the left side, and the goat which is chatos from the left side and move it to the right side. That's what we mean. And on that, he said there's no issue to do that. Each goat stays what it is. Just a question of which side he's on. So that he said, don't do that because the tzaddukim are going to give you a hard time. Okay, our next proof is from a brisa that it talks about 3 stages of the goyrel, the lat, being applied to the sar. First of all, it comes out of the box. When it comes out of the box, that's when it comes out. Then we talk about putting it on the goat that it's supposed to be on. That's called hanacha. So we have aliyah and hanacha. And the last thing is staying on for a long time afterwards. So the Gemara talks about the aliyah. The Gemara looks at the pasuk carefully. The pasuk says that which goat stays the azazel? It's the sar, the pasuk says, asher Allah olav ha-goyrel la-azazel. The goat that it came up on it and it's azazel. So Gemara says, the brisa says, you see, it's a goat that came up on it, but it does not need a hanacha. It does not need to actually stay there. It doesn't need to actually be put on there. It's enough if it just came up. So Gemara says, now hold on a second. What do you mean when it tells me it's enough? It means to tell me that it's not even a mitzvah? Not even a mitzvah to put it on there? It's definitely a mitzvah to put it on there. We know it says to put it on. You're supposed to put it on. It must mean that it's not ma'akev. So it's telling you that putting it on the goat is not ma'akev. But the implication clearly is that coming up is ma'akev. Otherwise, there's no difference between the coming up, the aliyah, and the hanacha. Gemara says, no, we're not talking about stage 1 and 2, stage of aliyah and stage of hanacha. We're talking about stage 2 and 3. When it says it being on it, it means that it stays on it for a long time, from when it was put on until shechita. It's coming to tell you that it does not have to stay on. It's allowed to fall off. It says that it's the goat asher Allah olav. It's the goat that it had the lot on it at some point, not that it's asher olav, that it's still on it. It doesn't have to be on it. Stage 3 is not a mitzvah. Stage 3 is not in anything. It doesn't have to stay on it all the way till shechita time. However, the stage before that, the stage of hanacha, that stage it's telling you is at least a mitzvah, and it doesn't tell you anything about the stage of aliyah. It doesn't discuss that, whether it could also be just a mitzvah or it could be that it's ma'akev. It doesn't specify. The Gemara now introduces its final conclusive proof. This is from a brisa in Sifra. The brisa seems to say pretty clearly that the goyrel has to be what designates. The drawing of lots has to be what decides which goat is the carbon chatas and which goat goes to hazazel. Because the brisa says as follows: you may think that the goyrel is not final. The word of the goyrel is not final, and it's really up to what he says. Why would I think that? So Gemara says, look, there are other situations where you bring 2 karbanos together and you have to decide which animal is for which, or which bird is for which. Let's say a zava, yoledes, they bring a chatas and a ola. It's the Kohen's responsibility there to determine what's what. And if he says, this one's a chatas, this one's the ola, that's it. It's fixed, set, can't go back. That's what it is. However, there, if he decides to make a goyrel, if he decides to draw lots which is which, it doesn't do anything. Until he says this is this, and this is that, it doesn't count for anything. The goyrel is not conclusive in any way. Now, here, it's not that way. Here, the goyrel is conclusive. You cannot switch the goyrel. So the Gemara says, let's make a kal v'chomer. In the case of the other karbanos, the goyrel does not work, and pronouncing it by name, calling it verbally designating which one is which, that works. So in a situation here of Yom Kippur goats, where the goyrel does work, certainly calling it by name should also work. And the Gemara says, no, it is not correct. We learn from the pasuk that says, so chatas, that the goyrel makes it into a chatas, and you cannot make it into a chatas by yourself. It has to be the goyrel that does it. Once the goyrel comes up, you can't switch it. So the Gemara says, you see clearly from this brisa that the goyrel has to be the one that makes it into the chatas. You yourself are not allowed to make it into a chatas. Without the goyrel, it doesn't count. Now, the Gemara says, who is the author of this brisa? It's a Sifra. It doesn't say who it is. And most brisas that are from Sifra are Rabbi Yehuda, and it's clear that it is Ma'akev. So if the brisa is Rabbi Yehuda and it is Ma'akev, that clearly shows me like the opinion of Rabbi Yanai, because Rabbi Yanai is the only one, according to Rabbi Yanai's second version, is the only one who says that there is a Rabbi Yehuda who holds that the girl is Ma'akev, and therefore we've ruled conclusively.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.